Good morning, David Greenwood here, partner Odgers Berndtson, the executive search firm based in Dubai. As I mentioned in my first video, I'm doing a number of interviews in a series, and I'm very fortunate to have Hosein Moghaddas back with me today. Hosein was the former CEO of Yoox Net-a-Porter in the region, based in Dubai for the last 3 and a bit years. Prior to that, 20 years in total, in fact, of digital transformation and e-commerce. Welcome back, Hosein.
Thank you, David. Lovely to chat to you again.
Today's interview or conversation is all around trends. And as we did with the first video, we wanted to really give sort of 3, maybe 4 points of conversation and takeouts, if you like. Hosein, putting you on the spot here now, but what would be the 3 key points in trends that we want to discuss today?
David, I would say there are 3 or 4 key here and now trends that we're certainly seeing. The first is sustainability and what that means, then customization and how that improves revenue, and then finally, I would say reviews and social commerce and how they come together. And if you want a 4th one, I would say that automation with the current situation will be a trend that we will definitely see within retailers.
The first one, sustainability. I think a number of people have different versions of sustainability in many different organizations, but if we just keep it towards retail, recycling is clearly something that is very important as we sit here today, and certainly within the fashion world. We've all seen very good examples from the bigger brands such as Adidas and some of the perhaps smaller brands and designers such as Stella McCartney. Rag & Bone is another one that springs to mind. And there's a number of other startups that have really come to the scene in a big way. In terms of recycling and how sustainable is that, what's your opinion on that sort of subject?
So I think you raised some very good points. Sustainability isn't just about the word. It is actually about the meaningful intent of what you're doing. And to talk about the raw materials side, where are you getting it from? How is it produced? Is it new raw materials or is it recycled, such as in the example that you've just given? But then moving from the raw materials on to the how are you going to deliver it? Will you be using electric vehicles? Will you be providing it in a meaningful way? And then finally, what happens after you've sold? Again, sustainability isn't just one end of the supply chain. It is the resell and the repeat resell, such as of vintage handbags. That would be a great example that we are seeing growing in both the region, in Dubai, and throughout the rest of Europe and North America.
One thing that you just touched on there is sustainability. It sounds like the full value chain, and I think more consumers, whether it be the high net worth individuals or whether it be the mass market, are more interested in the full value chain rather than just the actual product that it's made from. That seems to be more of a trend that certainly, I'm more interested to know how that product gets to the shelf or gets to the marketplace for me to purchase online. It seems to be a lot more important.
Yes, I would completely agree with you. And again, I would say that as a retailer, we have to be conscious of where it's coming from. If we look at our current customer base, maybe that's millennials, but also our future customers in Generation Z, and their intent on where it comes from, understanding where it comes from, how it's got to me. That is where sustainability and the trend of sustainability and proving what you're doing at each of the points within the supply chain will make a big difference.
And I certainly think e-commerce has a big part to play in terms of that messaging on the various channels. I mean, omni-channel we touched on before and we'll touch on again in the future, but I think the messaging has to be very clear to those consumers. going on to you mentioned it before in terms of the resold, the vintage handbag particularly is what you mentioned. You must be, aware of some of these brands coming up in the Middle East and particularly in Europe. Is there any particular, not necessarily brands, but any particular products you're seeing more of?
So handbags, as we mentioned, that's a very straightforward one. Within the luxury industry, it is really obvious that there are high net worth individuals here in the region. But then again, what are we going to do with 4 handbags sitting in a wardrobe? So sustainability at the other end is where organizations will allow you to use their marketplace in order to recycle those handbags at the end of one person's lifetime with it, to then pass it on. So there are a few companies here who've started up in the Middle East, and this is a great region, one, for the supply of those vintage handbags and luxury items, but 2, also there is a huge customer base that are looking at this from a recyclable, sustainable point of view, and also let's be quite serious from a cost point of view as well. Not everyone can afford high-end luxury, but if you have a chance to obtain that at a more reasonable price and be doing good for the planet at the same time, why not?
Just a final point on that, certainly within the timepieces. I mean, that's always been known, that if you buy a particular timepiece from years ago, now it's worth double the price, and I think people are very much in demand of that type of product. One thing that leads us nicely on is the customization, which does have relevance to that recycling piece as well. Can you describe the customization? I know in your career you've been involved in that quite heavily, but that's definitely a trend you're seeing continuing and in the future.
Very much so, I agree. And to define what I mean by customization is the ability to change the piece, maybe the shirt that I'm wearing, to represent how I want it to look like. So again, as retailers, we should be conscious that our customers are looking for something that is more unique to them. So again, I may decide to change the color of this logo. I may actually want it to be the same color. I may want it to be very vivid and stand out. That customization may also mean not only the size, which we're used to, we buy sizes to fit us, but actually the nature of the fit. So maybe I'm broader and therefore I need a more generous fit, but otherwise I may want a more customized fit for me. And again, I believe that brands and retailers will have to address this side of the market. You quite rightly mentioned that I have been involved in customization. And in fact, where customization can take you is to as much as 1/3 of your revenues being generated by allowing the consumer, your consumer, to customize, to again become more loyal to you as well. Because while they're getting your brand and your products, they are actually customizing it to their requirements as well.
I think certainly in the current time, the more thought process into buying those particular products and having the opportunity to customize it to be more unique to you as an individual is very much important. One of the last points that we raised is about that social, I guess, charter for some of the organizations. The influencers have had a real good couple of years in terms of really making play for some brands that they're representing. Do you believe the influencers will continue to be as strongly desirable, or do you think that some of the brands will start taking some of that equity back, shall we say?
That's a very good way of putting it. I believe that in the region, within the Middle East, that the paid influencers still have a material part to play within sales and revenue generation. On the other hand, though, the trend, I believe, will be to be going away from paid influencers to real consumer commentary, reviews, and using that as the genuine influence for prospective customers and repeat customers. I believe that reviews, whether they're 1-star or 5-star, will have a very different impact. So an example I will give you, if I want to go away to a hotel and it's a 1-star review, and the reason for that is because there were kids there using the pool with a great kids club, I may decide that actually, even though it's a 1-star review, that is absolutely fantastic because I can take my kids there and we can enjoy all of the facilities. So again, reviews, having genuine reviews from consumers who have nothing more than goodwill to share with other consumers will drive more business than paid influencers who, as time goes on, it's incredibly obvious that these are paid influencers and therefore are influencing from a positive respect.
I also think one of the trends that's coming out of Asia is some of the staff that are being trained, particularly through this pandemic and having the opportunity to go through some very rigorous training, is they're actually doing the demonstrations on a number of channels with, you know, their loyal customers at first, but they're actually giving a real overview of that particular product and how it's worn and how it would look in different environments, shall we say. But there's a lot more technology involved in looking at a product, particularly online, before even purchasing. And I think that the brands will bring those in-house rather than using a paid influencer. Although saying that paid influencers do have value, if they've got 1 million plus followers, then that can't be overrated, I guess. The final point, sorry, Oz.
No, I would just say I definitely agree with you. And I think you've also raised another very important trend, which is, as opposed to merely having a transactional site, the site whereby you're selling both mobile and on the laptop will become a vehicle for more editorial. So it's about engaging with your customer, giving them something back. So sure, if I'm buying a toilet roll at the moment, then I don't need any engagement and I can buy that. On the other hand, if I'm buying one of the beautiful timepieces that I'm buying for my wife's birthday, then I will do a lot of research. So what you've described, the ability for the store staff to share with you online, to give commentary, to show how to tie a beautiful tie, for example, or how to wear a wonderful headscarf would be of immense value. So I do agree with you, that's the right way forward.
I think we've got a little bit of time for the last point that which is very, very important, is the logistics. Obviously, we're not going to dwell on the detail of that, but I think that there's one particular trend that is becoming more and more popular, certainly with the likes of Amazon Prime in the region, is that same day delivery, or in some cases, and certainly in some countries, and again, I refer back to Asia, it's within hours. Do you feel that the brands will take back their ownership of when they believe, or do you think the consumer will really take the initiative and they want it when they want it?
So the simple answer for me is the consumer will always dictate. And if in the end of the day you cannot deliver as your customer wants, then I believe they won't be your customer for very long. I think if we go back a dozen years ago, that was a time when, as a retailer, we could dictate exactly how the consumer, the customer, would engage with us. Those times are long gone. So quite frankly, we talked about loyalty earlier on. Loyalty is earned, and the way to earn that loyalty is by delivering, literally in the sense of delivering to your consumer at the time that they want it. So it's many organizations are heading down the route of same day, 2-hour, 4-hour delivery. But I have been a strong proponent always that the consumer, your customer, will tell you when they want it. And therefore, the UK grocery market is a perfect example of giving consumers time slots to say between 9 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. you can deliver this to me. There's a real reason for that, because if mum has a school run, for example, or dad has a school run, for example, then quite frankly, anytime before that or after that, they might not be in. And therefore, it means that it's a wasted delivery. So I do strongly believe that the consumer will dictate, not just for deliveries, David, but absolutely for everything within the e-commerce and the omni-channel world will be dictated by the consumer. So really, my last point would be that organizations should be looking to their own customers to understand what the trends are and deliver those that give the greatest revenue.
That's where I guess the customer insights will, and the data, the big data will become more and more important. And I think, automation we will touch on. I think you've got a very strong opinion on automation, which ultimately resonates to your point that the speed of response in getting the product to the customer, more automation and technology will ultimately give you that.
Yes, I agree. And again, as you said, with the current circumstances and the global crisis we see, that many organizations who already had automation in place are succeeding. So I would add omni-channel to that in place will give success right now. Automation within a warehouse, for example, gives huge success because we're seeing staff numbers dropping. We're seeing that trends within e-commerce are increasing. I would say that any of the metrics of how well e-commerce was doing in the region in December 2019 have absolutely been blown out in January 2020. So the propensity to buy, the repurchase, the penetration, all of these numbers within the e-commerce world have hugely increased. And if you were not prepared for this scenario, then you are suffering, and you have to be looking at how you could be becoming omnichannel, how you could be automating within your warehouses. So I think it's never too late, but you do have to start as soon as possible.
Thank you. We are running out of time. I think that the key points that you raised are all very much important with the trends now and going forward. And I think from a consumer perspective, the whole omni-channel, as we keep referencing, it's best time as ever now to get that right, because e-commerce, rather than being a separate business unit in some organizations, I think the chief digital officers are becoming more and more powerful in the board meetings to really influence all the relevant key stakeholders and peers, from the CFO to the CHRO. And I think that long time that has been a separate. I think that now it's going to be a combined purpose in an organization, which is good to see.
Yes, I would agree with you.
Thank you very much for your time today, Hosein, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, and you. Bye, David.
Bye-bye.